So, again, you will hear from each of the crime scene individuals the crime scene agents who process the scene. There was usually one main one, and then usually another individual that would help that individual process the scene. They first start taking photographs of outside, and they work their way inside. They take pictures of everything as they find it before disturbing anything. And then they go back and start looking where there's evidence and putting down markers that mark that evidence and collecting, blood swabs or ballistics or anything that they find. So let's talk about what we found at the crime scenes. At crime scene 1, where Chris Sr. and Gary Roden were, they recovered one .40 caliber shell casing, and they also, the following day, recovered a fully jacketed ammo from underneath the floor, and that was a heavier weight .30 caliber ammo. And you will hear from Matt White that he believed that to be probably a 7.69 .32 ammo, but he didn't know for sure because there wasn't enough of it left to tell that. That was from scene 1. Additionally, in scene 1, there were shoe prints that were collected. You will learn that, because there was so much blood at that scene, there were shoe prints that were left there, and those were collected. They literally just cut up that part of the floor and submitted it to the lab for processing, where you will hear from the BCI expert who processes that stuff that she was able to get 2 very good shoe prints for comparison. What they do from that point is they try to ascertain what shoe this is, right? So there's databanks that BCI has, databanks that FBI has, but she was not able to find that in any of the databanks that were present. So she went out herself to various shoe stores and places that sell shoes and trying to find something that matched that shoe print, the tread and design. And she was actually able to find that shoe at Walmart. It was a men's shoe, Velcro, and she was able to tell that it was either a 10.5 or an 11. You will later learn that she was only focused on one shoe print. When she actually looked at both, she discovered that there was a 10.5 and an 11 size shoe print in that residence. So a 10.5 and a size 11 of the same shoe, same type of shoe, just different sizes in the same shoe. So she was able to glean that from scene 1. And I should note, I didn't tell you this before, but after everything was secured at the scenes, the Bobby Joe Manley, Billy Morgan, Emmy Morgan, and James Manley, all individuals who first discovered the deceased individuals, were taken to the sheriff's office and interviewed. That's traditional. If you're the first person that discovers something, you're going to be interviewed. They also took their shoes, or in James Manley's case, took pictures of the shoes because he did not want to part with his boots. So we know that the shoe does not belong to any of those individuals. Okay, so that was the reason for doing that, is because they very quickly realized that there was this shoe print evidence. You will hear from Matt White that the .40 caliber shell casing that was left at Chris Sr.'s residence, he believed it to belong to a Glock, and he believed it to be a 3rd or 4th generation Glock. He also, there was a shell casing, .40 caliber, recovered from Kenneth Roden's address as well. Just he was only shot one time, and the shell casing was still there, and those two matched. And when I say they matched, I don't mean they're just the same type of ammo. I mean they were fired from the same gun, okay? They can tell by the impressions that are made when the bullet is fired through the gun. So they were able to tell that Chris Roden Sr., Gary Roden, and Kenneth Roden were all shot by the same .40 caliber Glock. As to Frankie and Hannah Hazel and Dana and Hannah Mae and little Chris, they found 22 shell casings, 22 caliber shell casings, rimfire shell casings at both Frankie's laying in the bed. Especially when they removed the body, they were able to find all these shell casings. There were 5 at Frankie and Hannah Hazel's, and there was only one single shell casing found at the residence where Dana and Hannah and little Chris lived, and that was underneath the crib in the room where Hannah Mae slept. But they were able to match those. Those also were, so we learned that Frankie and Hannah Hazel, Dana, Hannah Mae, and little Chris were all killed with the same weapon. Now, Matt White was less sure about what type of .22 weapon that was because he had never seen the markings. The markings were very unique. So he reached out to a lot of professional organizations trying to find out. Ultimately, Bowling Green's BCI lab ran across a gun that was a Colt 1911 .22 long rifle that made a very similar impression on the shell casing. So Matt White compared those, and he said, yes, this is the same type of weapon. So he became certain, not the identical weapon, not the weapon, but the same type of weapon, because he talked to people in Germany who confirmed for him that Colt made that weapon, and the firing pin made a very unique, that very unique marking on the shell casing. So he was convinced that we were looking for a 1911 .22 long rifle. So they also determined, based on the ammo and the injuries to Chris Roden Sr., he was shot. Again, he and Gary were the only two who were fully dressed and awake when this happened. You could tell that he had been standing in front of the doorway when he was first shot. He had wood embedded in his face and his head, and they could tell it was a high-powered rifle, like an AR or an SKS, and that would fit with the ammo that they found as well. So we're kind of just narrowing down what guns we're looking for and that sort of thing through ballistic evidence. Matt White is our firearms expert at BCI, and we now know that there were 3 weapons involved in the killing of these 8 individuals. The autopsies also confirmed those findings. The coroner will tell you, and the coroner is Dr. Lohman from Hamilton County Coroner's Office. She will tell you that the injuries she saw were consistent on the 5 that we believe were killed with the .22 of a smaller caliber weapon. She definitely felt that it had to be a high-powered rifle that Chris Sr. got shot in his arm because it tore through his muscle and caused fractures of his arm. And that the .40 caliber, the injuries were consistent with the .40 caliber being on Kenneth, Chris Sr., and Gary Roden. So basically, Chris Roden Sr. was shot with 2 different weapons, a high-powered rifle and a .40 Glock. They were also able to tell the angle by which, from where the high-powered rifle was shot, and they do that based on the angles of the holes and stuff, and again, you'll hear from the crime scene agents that were responsible for doing that. They could tell that it had been from outside of the residence and that it was someone who was positioned down from where he was shot. And again, you'll get to see those angles. Another shoe print was found in scene 3 with the identical shoe that our shoe print expert had found at Walmart. It was the size 11. They were able to ascertain that, and you will hear a very detailed explanation of that. It's actually quite intriguing if you've never really thought about the bottom of your shoe before. But there's different stippling or impressions that they make on the bottom of the shoe so that no size is going to be the same, right? So the design on it, there's subtle differences, but you'll be able to see it with your own 2 eyes, that there's definite distinguishable differences. You will hear not only from Suzanne Elliott, who is the BCI expert in shoe print analysis, but also from an individual named William Bodziak, who is kind of considered the grandfather of shoe print evidence. He's been doing it for decades. He used to work for the FBI, has been referred to by the Supreme Court, United States Supreme Court, as one of the 2 world-renowned experts in the field of shoe print evidence. So it was important enough evidence that that stuff got sent to him to analyze as well. And he confirms everything that Suzanne Elliott determined, which is that there was a size 10.5 and a size 11 of this particular shoe inside scene 1, and a size 11 of the same shoe inside scene 3. Scene 3 being Dana Roden and Hannah Mae and Christopher Roden Sr., sorry. We kind of number those just based on how they were discovered, right? Chris Sr.'s house was discovered first, Frankie's was second, Dana's was third, and then Kenneth's was fourth. So sometimes you'll hear individuals talking, their witnesses talking about it in that way. The other thing that people deduced from the processing the scenes and looking at the evidence was that there was likely a silencer or suppressor used, especially when you're talking about with Frankie and Hannah and Dana and Hannah Mae and Chris Roden, little Chris, because they did not wake up. It did not appear that they woke up when the first individual was shot. So that would lead one to believe that probably a suppressor or silencer was used. So they kind of, again, this is just things that we're deducing based on the evidence and going forward in the investigation for. The other thing that the investigators felt strongly about was that whoever killed these individuals were very intimate with both the personal habits of the Rodens and the residences themselves. The reason they said that, again, I told you that Dana Roden and Hannah Mae and little Chris had just moved into that residence less than 30 days prior. So you had to know them well enough to know that, right? This kind of gets rid of the drug cartel idea, and other individuals who just wouldn't know that, right? But they also knew of the surveillance cameras, et cetera, that were located at each of these places. Now, they weren't located at each of these places. Chris Sr.'s house had cameras, and Kenneth had cameras. Those were removed. So whoever killed these people knew that, right? So again, that's what the initial just processing of the crime scene indicated to investigators. In the meantime, of course, we're getting thousands of tips. Thousands is an exaggeration. We had more than 1,000 tips. Doing multiple, everybody's going in all directions. Immediately, there was information that the Rodens had been in an argument with a group of individuals, and that group of individuals had threatened them on Facebook. And then one of those individuals actually took credit for it after the homicides and claimed that they had committed the homicides. That individual was found and interviewed, and that story quickly fizzled. So it was not those individuals. But, you know, the investigators considered everybody, right? We talked about, I guess, the building that you saw there, where we had you look up the stairs, that would have been right beside the residence, had a marijuana grow in it at Chris Sr.'s location. And there was a smaller version of that at Kenneth's. So, of course, the investigators ran down, and every lead, you know, related to anybody any of these individuals would have dealings with. We also did tower dumps. Tower dumps just tell you what phones are hitting off what towers at that time of the homicides. And, you know, you just kind of trap and preserve that information. Back to the shoe print stuff, we knew that that was a Walmart shoe. We knew what kind of Walmart shoe it was. And so we got video footage of all Walmart, anybody who purchased a size 10.5 or 11 in between the months of January 2016 and April 2016 in a 50-mile radius of the crime scene. So lots of Walmarts that we got video footage from, that anybody who purchased that, because we knew that those shoes belonged to the people who killed these individuals. Another thing that we could tell about the shoes was that they were new. Immediately upon examination of the prints that were left at the scene, our expert was able to tell us that that was either never worn or nearly never worn. So we were looking, that's why we only asked for that kind of time frame, right? So a lot was, we were able to learn just from the physical evidence, at least as far as what we were looking for. So what finally turned our attention to the Wagners? When Jake Wagner was initially interviewed, pretty early in the investigation, he indicated that everything was just dandy between he and Hannah Mae. And it wasn't until we got back those Facebook records and some of the text messaging that we found that that was not the case, right? So we're seeing these messages where she's saying that. So that contradicted what he was saying. She was confronting him about being violent. We also saw that, you know, the message between Tabitha's mom. Additionally, Billy Wagner was interviewed, and he indicated that we were asking everybody for their phones just to, you know, because they had interactions with the victims. We wanted to get their phones just to kind of see if we could piece anything together. And he indicated that he did not have the phone that he had at the time of the homicides because he kept trying to call Chris Sr. because Chris Sr. was his best friend, and after the homicides, he kept trying to call him, and he finally got frustrated and upset one day and broke his phone. Well, that was a good story, but it wasn't true because we have phone records that indicate he never once tried to call Chris Sr. And in fact, we had the